it's Rosecat. Welcome back to the channel. I hope everyone is having the most frightfully fun, spooky time ever. And speaking of frightfully fun, today we are going to be talking about Monster High, which is something that is very near and dear to my heart. I grew up with Monster High. I have a lot of their dolls to this very day. I still collect them, and I do plan to buy the new reboot dolls. Today, specifically, we're talking about the reboot movie. Now, disclaimer, before I get into any of this, I have not watched the original movies from G1 or G2. They are just not what I grew up with. I never watched any of the animated stuff. I did have a friend with me on call who did, and said that this movie is much different from anything from G1 specifically. So if that's going to be something that bothers you a lot, I'm sorry, maybe this movie isn't for you. But, whatever, you can watch the rest of the review to make your own opinion about that. 2, sorry if this is incredibly late and everyone has already done this. I'm a busy man. I simply do not have the time or energy sometimes, and that means that this is a bit late. But I tried my best, so I'm sorry. I'm hoping that this at least gets out by the end of October. Third disclaimer, this is not going to be about the dolls or the new animated segment. Those will probably be in a different video. This is going over just the new live-action musical adaptation that has been released on Nickelodeon. So, obviously, when I first heard about this movie coming out, obviously, as probably a lot of people were, I was not very impressed. And Nickelodeon original high school live-action adaptation of Monster High is something that I don't think anyone has ever asked for, but, it's here, and I watched it, so I'm gonna share my opinions on it. So let's talk about the good things to start off with, because I feel like there was a lot of good things about this movie that maybe people weren't expecting. So overall, one of the coolest things, I think, was the overall concept of the school in this movie. As you may remember from Generation 1, Monster High as a building has always been this very, to me at least, very modern, stereotypical high school setting with just a few creepy little things thrown in there for good measure. I don't think that's a bad way to go about it. I think that it was a lot more relatable. I think that it was very classic and understandable, and it was fine, but I really do like the version of Monster High that is presented in this movie. So essentially, the way that Monster High works here is that it's very magical boy school-esque. Like, it's a boarding school, it's very old, it's got this haunted mansion vibe to it, it's got this big old clock tower that has an eye in it, which is objectively the coolest design ever, and the eye can even, like, that clock tower is where, like, the principal's office is, and the eye will, like, look around and stuff. It's really cool. It's just overall very fantasy, very whimsical. I can't wait for there to be, like, a giant playset of it in the doll line at some point, as is customary for, Monster High. I think it's gonna be so cool. It's alive. It's canonically alive. It does stuff like make new, it'll, like, make new rooms for students on command, and it'll write things in blood on the walls and stuff like that. And I think that's super cool, too. And I hope that, like, with the animated series and stuff, we get to see some more stuff like that. The main trio specifically have a really good costuming and makeup design. All of their outfits are really cute, I think, and encapsulate their characters in very lovely ways. They never really skimped out, I feel. Like, I can't describe it other than, like, all of them feel like something that the characters would wear. I never felt like they skimped out and just put them in, like, a normal outfit, or just put them in something spooky that didn't match them. I always felt like they looked like realistic interpretations of what the characters would wear, which I think is super cool. Can't say the same for a lot of the background characters, but what can you do? At least the main guys that you see the most look good. So this movie, I'm pretty sure, had a mixture of both practical and CGI effects, and the practical effects always, well, most of the time look better than the CGI stuff. Just simple things. Fangs, ears, all that stuff looks good. Like, contact lenses look solid. I don't really have a problem with it. I know my one friend was complaining that they didn't look very real, but I think that just in the nature of them being practical effects, they immediately look more real than if they were to be just, like, CGI nonsense. And alone in itself is charming, even if it may not be the most realistic in the world. You gotta keep in mind that this movie has, like, a shoestring budget, so literally any effort they put in is bound to be worth it, in my personal opinion. Back to the set design, I forgot to mention, there's also this graveyard that's seen throughout the movie that I also think looks super cool. It's super foggy and misty, and, like, there's this blue hue over everything, and, like, it's just a cool set. I just liked watching it and being there, and, you know, sometimes that's what you need. All the, like, effects just in the background in general are pretty good. To the point where I could often not tell what was an actual lighting effect in, like, their set and what was done, like, post-production, which I think is pretty impressive, all things considered. Though maybe I'm just a bit blind to this stuff like that. There's two characters in the movie who I really enjoyed their personalities. Frankie is the cutest, dorkiest person in the entire world in this movie. I love them so much. They're really socially awkward. They, like, spurt fun facts, rapid fire. They like to talk about, like, historical figures their body is made out of a lot. Like, they'll do, like, off-kilter things because they don't really know how to human yet. Stuff like that I just think is really cute and endearing of them. And I think is also really relatable to me personally as someone who doesn't really get stuff like that super well sometimes. I just think they're a lovely character to be around. Another thing to mention about the casting in this movie is that, one thing about the casting that I didn't even think about was that I'm pretty sure most of the characters who were casted are casted to be the same ethnicity as the characters are supposed to be, which sounds like a pretty low bar to set, but from what I'm aware, the character in this who plays Cleo is actually an Egyptian person, which is more than a lot of big-name Hollywood studios can even do. I might have to fact-check that, but I'm pretty sure that's how that is. So that's cool. But also, the way that the movie characters are, like, their heights are a bit different than the doll line. Instead of Frankie being super tall, Frankie in this movie is super short, and it's really cute. They look so tiny in comparison to their two, like, co-stars, Claudine and Draculaura, and I think it's lovely. Another character I really enjoyed was Gulia. Gulia isn't a super important character in this, they're kind of a background character. And also, they're not nonverbal in this, so I can't really talk about that because I'm not nonverbal. But if there's anyone else who is, like, annoyed by that, who's nonverbal, feel free to talk about that, because I think it is a discussion that has to be had. However, I think, regardless if they're nonverbal or not, they were a lovely character. They're very silly, they're very good comic relief. There's, like, a running gag of them, like, sleeping in the graveyard and stuff. I just thought it was, I just think they're cool. a lot of the jokes in this movie are really goofy and, like, kind of what I expect from Monster High. You know, groan-worthy puns, stupid stuff like that, weird monster culture stuff. There's only one joke in the entire movie that I think is particularly offensive. They don't really resort to, like, immature jokes that often. Like, they're immature, but they're not, like, toilet humor or anything like that most of the time. Like, they're all very inoffensive, like, fine jokes. They're just monster puns and stuff, which I think is really fun and encapsulates a lot of the spirit of Monster High from what I'm aware of it personally. I think that's very important. And most of the songs are fine. They're not, like, so good that I'd listen to them again, but they're good enough that, like, if a younger sibling were to put them on or something, I wouldn't, like, be opposed to it. Like, they're not that annoying. They do their job. They're kind of just, like, normal pop songs. Like, they don't do anything too offensive. But yeah, next up are the things I did not like about the movie. This, as everyone kind of expected, the CGI effects are kind of atrocious, especially for Deuce's hair and Heath's hair. They're just not very good. There's not much to say about that. I appreciate that they put in the effort, but it's just not selling it for me. I mean, I guess it's better than Deuce having, like, a wig made out of rubber snakes or something, but it's not my favorite thing in the world. The background characters are kinda, like, really, really funny. Like, it's kind of ridiculous, because it's like, from what it looks like to me, my one friend kept trying to point out, like, characters that kind of sort of looked like they might have had Generation 1 counterparts, but even then they're such an abstract representation of what the character might be, might have been supposed to be. But from what I'm looking at, to me it always just kind of looked like they gave them a giant bin full of discount Spirit Halloween pieces and told them to go wild and come up with something, which is kind of funny, but it gets kind of distracting at points because it's hard not to notice some of the really bad costume decisions sometimes. Specifically, there are these two characters that me and my friend kept noticing. I always noticed this one kid really looked like Ace from the Powerpuff Girls, or Gorillas, depending on what circles you're in. And then my friend kept pointing out that one character just really, really looked like Marge Simpson, and both of those were really funny to, spot in the background. But yeah. Next up are some of the characters that I didn't like, and I like them all for different reasons. Cleo, Laguna, and I'm also gonna throw Abby in here, even though she's not in my notes. None of these characters really got as much screen time or importance as I think they should have. I don't like Cleo as a character, but I understand that she's very important for Monster High in general, and she's just kind of such a minor, non-existent antagonist. She's mean to the main characters sometimes, but she never, gets anywhere or does anything with the plot. She's kind of just there to be an annoyance. Laguna hardly gets any screen time whatsoever. The only screen time that she gets is that she's, in this movie, she's kind of characterized as, a friend of Cleo's, kind of in the vein that Gullia was in the original series. That's literally all we get from her. She talks to Cleo, right at the beginning, and then we hardly ever see her ever again, to the point where, she shows up in the end finale, and I'm just, questioning, why are you here? You didn't do anything! But yeah, I think she deserved better, because she's also, considered a main character, so she didn't deserve to be shafted like that. Same thing with Abby. I know that Abby technically isn't a main character, and by that I mean she didn't come out with the others, at the very beginning of Generation 1, but, she's a fan favorite for the most part. I think she deserved more. She's really cute in this movie. I really like how she's styled, so I think she deserved better. Deuce and Draculaura are on here for very similar reasons, which is that I don't like how they're characterized in this movie. So, I recognize that, obviously how they're going to be shown in this movie is going to be different from their personalities in Generation 1, because that's just how reboots work, but I just don't like the personalities given to either of them. So, for Draculaura, I'm most offended, because she's my favorite character from Generation 1. We all know what Draculaura is supposed to be, right? Right? She's energetic, she's goofy, she's bubbly, she's kind of like Monster High's Pinkie Pie. And I've always liked that characterization of her, and I wouldn't have her any other way. So the way that they kind of made her in this movie is not my favorite. In this movie, she's a lot more mature. She's, sassy and sarcastic. And even at the beginning, I feel like she's just straight up mean and kind of a bitch to the main characters. And, I just don't like that for her. I don't think it's a good look. She's, her actor is beautiful, and she's, I like her aesthetics and stuff, but I just don't like her personality whatsoever. She does get better, as the movie progresses and gets less like that over time, but it's just not my favorite look in the world for her. And then it's basically the opposite problem with Deuce, where instead of Deuce being this punk bad boy type character, he's kind of just, a pathetic nerd boy. And maybe I just have, too much baggage with pathetic nerd boys in my life to deal with him right now, but I want my punk Deuce back. I think that's the pizzazz that he deserves and needs, to really be worthwhile for me. And then Heath is on here. Not for any particular reason, just because I really don't like Heath. That sounds mean, but, even in Generation 1, I didn't find him all that important. Heath, to me, has always had the aura of, a background character that slithered his way into the main cast via being boyfriends with Abby, and, I'm sorry to him for that, but, he doesn't deserve to be here. He's another character that at the finale I was like, why are you here? You don't need to be here, you didn't do anything! But yeah, I don't know, his actor seemed to be having fun, that's the most I can say about him. But yeah. The last thing I have before we get into spoiler territory is Deuce's song, and I don't really have anything to say about it, it just wasn't very good. That's about it. It's the least enjoyable song in the entire movie. So yeah, that's about it about that. After this point is officially spoiler territory. So if you don't want to be spoiled for this movie because you think you're going to want to watch it, either for good reasons or for bad reasons, I suggest skipping this part and going straight to the conclusion. So, the plot. Let's actually get into the plot. Let's summarize it for everyone at home. Slightly messily because I watched this movie a couple weeks ago. I'm sorry. But okay, so basically the story is about Claudine, who is half wolf or half werewolf, half human in this story, deciding to go to Monster High for the first time in her life. The big problem with Monster High is that it is very, very, very against humans. Like, even half humans, half monsters, if they find out that a monster is half human, they're going to be discriminatory against them. So that becomes a giant problem for Claudine, because whenever Claudine gets anxious or scared, she becomes more human. So she comes to the conclusion that, fuck this, I don't want to be human anymore. And she finds out about how, this old person who used to go to Monster High, was half human, half monster, and this person made this serum that would permanently make it so that a monster is no longer human, or like half human. So basically the entire movie is her going around trying to find the ingredients for this potion, so that way she can make it, and basically reverse her human, get rid of her human aspect of her. So she does this, she makes the potion, you know, whatever, blah blah blah. She's about to drink it, and then she decides, no, wait, I don't want to drink it. I don't want to be fully monster, because my dad is a human, and I want to respect his bloodline just as much as I'm respecting my mother's. So, she decides not to drink it, and then plot twist, the teacher who told her about the guy who made the potion or whatever, he comes down and is like, haha, joke's on you, I was the guy that I was telling you about all along, and then he drinks the potion and it turns him into this giant demon thing. And then he gets turned into stone because Deuce turned him into stone. It's more convoluted than that, but I'm just gonna say that Deuce turned him into stone. Technically, he turned himself into stone because he stole Deuce's powers, but yeah, and then the world is saved, hurrah, Monster High isn't gonna get destroyed, whatever. That is basically what this movie is about. So, oh, also, it's so not part of the plot that I completely forgot to mention it. Claudine also has a crush on Deuce. That's it. And that's something that I'm going to talk about, now, actually, because I think that the fact that I completely forgot to mention it in my summary really brings home how useless this part of the plot is, and that, really brings home why I'm annoyed that it's here, because it's really not necessary, at all, and, it just feels so forced, and I'm gonna, ramble about how I think that relationship should be in Monster High real quick. So, these people hardly have any chemistry, for one. They only have one scene together where they're talking with each other, and even then it kind of feels forced in the way that, it brings up stuff that was never even brought up previously, because basically the way that they try and relate these two characters is that, okay, Claudine feels unwanted at the school because she's half monster and half human, and that brings up a lot of conflicting feelings for her because, all these monsters here essentially want her to just stop existing or to stop going to the school. And then Deuce is like, oh yeah, I can relate with you on that. I'm a Gorgon. People at Monster High hate Gorgons because we have a bad reputation. And I have no idea what he's talking about here. Because, throughout the entire movie, you never ever once get an idea that Deuce is an unliked student of the school. You always see him hanging out with these other kids that are, in these Monster High Letterman jackets. And if you know anything about, storytelling 101 in movies like this, you know that Letterman jackets are, the most giveaway sign you could give a character that those are popular kids that are, well-renowned in the school for being popular kids. And he hangs out with those people constantly, so I have no idea what this is about, or why they're saying, why he's saying this, or where this is coming from. Because it's just false. It's just objectively not true. He's obviously well-liked at this school, and it just feels so convoluted to try and pretend that he's not, just so that he can relate with Claudine. And then on top of that, so this is kind of a more dorky thing to bring up, but I feel like there's always this very specific way that Monster High goes about things when it comes to creating its couples, which is that they have to match together and feel like they are literally made for each other. I am not exaggerating, this is how it works, and I think it's a cute character design perspective. Cute from a character design perspective, so I'm going to talk about it. So, basically, like, if you look at any of the Monster High sets, no matter what, they always match. Like, okay, Cleo and Deuce. It's kind of harder to explain this one, but, like, you know what I'm talking about. Like, snakes, desert, mythology, Cleopatra was Greek, that kind of stuff. They fit together. Even if it's hard to describe, you know what I'm talking about. From more than just a personality perspective, they feel like they were made for each other. Abby and Heath are obviously opposites attract type of deal, so they make sense together. Frankie, Holt, and Jackson are all mad scientist based, and that's why they're together. All of these things feel so little, but they really, to me at least, show like there's a lot of cohesiveness that I feel like is really cute when coming up not only with just doll concepts, but just like, I don't know, it's kind of nice, right? To have the characters that are like the lovers kind of match with each other. But Deuce and Claudine don't even have that most basic understanding of that. And like, I know that sounds like a really petty thing and that I should focus more on character, but I did focus on character, and they don't even line up that way. So at the very least, like, from a character design perspective, they don't either. So speaking of characters lining up with each other, if, in case you remember, Draculaura and Claude are together, because Draculaura is a vampire and Claude is a werewolf, and those things are together because they have been rivals / like, paired with each other in, like, a bunch of different Halloween horror media since, like, the beginning of their inception, essentially. So they kind of fit together in that kind of way. And you know who also fits that criteria? Claudine and Draculaura. And yes, I have evidence pointing towards why this is a good idea, and you're going to hear me out about it because this is my video. Okay, so basically, like, throughout this entire movie, they already have more chemistry than than Claudine and Deuce do, just in, like, okay, so let me talk about it. So, on top of Claudine having this story where she's half human and is ashamed of her half human bloodline, Draculaura is ashamed of herself because she is practicing witchcraft on school grounds, which, there's this whole thing about, like, how witchcraft is shameful because witches and vampires have been feuding for all eternity, and so for her to be doing this thing is super duper bad in, like, both the terms of disappointing her father and in the terms of Monster High itself, because last time I checked, I'm pretty sure witches are also considered human in this universe, so that also gives it a level of discrimination. So these two repeatedly bond over the fact that both of them actually do have similar problems, which is that they also, you know, they feel discriminated against in Monster High because they're doing this thing, or they are this thing that they're not supposed to. And they bring this up multiple times to bring them closer together as friends, and, like, you can already kind of see where I'm going with this, right? I don't have to explain that much. There's even this entire scene later where, like, Claudine snaps or something and, like, tries to run away back to the human world, and Draculaura is the one who, like, pep talks her and is like, no, you're wanted at Monster High, and, like, brings her back. I'm pretty sure they even, like, hold hands or something. Like, there's a lot of subtext here that makes me think that they would be a really, really cute couple with the way that they bond throughout the movie, and, like, they have a more close of a bond than either of them do with Frankie, and, like, there's just so much stuff pointing to it. But of course they didn't do that, because why would they do that? You know, they just don't. They just don't. Probably because they want Claude to still exist later, but, like, Claude can exist on his own without having to date someone. He's allowed to just do that. He doesn't need to exist on Draculaura's terms. He can still exist as a character. But, yeah, so that's my personal headcanon for these two, that if this movie was not a coward, Draculaura and Claudine should have been the couple, and they should have realized that throughout the course of the movie. But yeah. And the last thing that I want to talk about is the whole teacher plot twist thing. Because specifically, so that character I was telling you about, or I guess the teacher I was telling you about, he's supposed to be the person who is the, I guess, like, the grandson of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and that just, I shouldn't have to explain to you why this is a problem, because that means that Hall and Jackson can't exist. They deserve to exist, guys. Like, I don't... Like, they're not even gotten rid of for a good reason, because the fucking movie is flimsy and the plot doesn't make sense. So it's not even that they're, like, being getting rid of for, like, a good plot thing. They're getting rid of for a bad plot thing. I hope we get to see them, like, somehow, because, like, that's just kind of, like, disconcerting to me that they got rid of Holt and Jackson for this plot that doesn't make sense, and it annoys me a lot, and it's not very smart. And the effects on the teacher aren't even really good when he hulks out or whatever. Like, it's just all really flimsy and clumsy, and, like, there were things pointing to it. Like, it's not like the plot twist came out of left field or anything. It's just really disappointing. And, yeah, it's just kind of, like, a super weak end for the movie, too. It's just not my favorite thing in the world. But, yeah, that's the sour note that I'm ending the bad things section of this video on. Although, in conclusion, I think this movie is pretty alright. I mean, I know I just, like, said a bunch of bullshit about its plot for a second there, and how I don't like it, but, like, I don't know how to describe it, but, like, I don't think the plot is important in this case. I think that it's more about the atmosphere, and the jokes, and the characters, and just having a good time with these, like, people, these characters, that, like, you either have nostalgia for, or, like, you know, you're learning to know, and enjoying the new reboot or whatever. I mean, I don't really know how to describe it. It's just, like, it's light, it's fluffy, it's low stakes. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. Like I said, there's nothing cringy about it, there's nothing offensive about it. It's just, like, pure Halloween nonsense. And sometimes I just need pure Halloween nonsense. Two things I did not bring up in the good parts of the movie, part of this video, is that at the very end of the movie, it shows off, like, all these TikToks and behind-the-scene, like, videos that they took, and I think that the last part that I like about this movie that really sells it for me is that this movie has a lot of heart. Like, you can tell that the people who worked on it, specifically the actors, had a really fun time filming it, and were just goofing off the entire time, and having such a great, like, experience being able to film it. And, like, in this common world where we live in right now, where I feel like movies just get more and more hollow and meaningless as time goes on, to see this movie, for something as silly as Monster High, be, like, fully embraced by its young adult actors, and just let them have a good time, is honestly just kind of nice. It's just nice to have that energy. It's like watching, like, a high school theater performance. Like, maybe it's not the best it could be, but you can tell that everyone put a lot of work into it, and that they're having a good time. And sometimes that's really all that you need. So yeah, if you really like stuff like Disney Channel original movies, or have a younger sibling who you think would enjoy Monster High and want to introduce them to the new reboot, or anything like that, if you just want, like, a nice fluffy time, then I recommend this movie. I think that it's not the worst thing you could watch. You could even put it on while doing something else and it'd be kind of unobtrusive background noise. But yeah, that being said, if you're obviously looking for something more intense, or if you're looking for something that evokes nostalgia, maybe try, you know, an actual movie for adults. Or, you know, go back to your favorite old movies from Generation 1. Might be more up your alley than trying something new. But yeah, that's my overall opinion on this movie. I hope that this maybe, you know, gave you some good things to think about this movie. Whether that's you shouldn't watch it, or you should. I just hope that I helped you come to an opinion, or to a decision. And yeah, I will see you next video. Happy Halloween!